Hey, land back, everyone. Land back. Good morning.
Good
Grand
morning.
rising. Coming to
Yes.
the
Got my
room.
coffee. Got my BuildHammer. Oops, not BuildHammerCity. BlackHammer.org coffee mug. You can get this at the website, BuildHammerCity.com.
Yes. Come
Morning,
in,
y'all.
share. You come into the room. Hashtag share when you share it. You want to share it to as many groups, to as many Facebook pages, to as many people as possible. All right. Let's get out this political education to our people. And make sure you put hashtag share when you share it. I want to see that. I got the comments here. I want to see that. So share it. Share it.
Yes, welcome, y'all. This is the Revolutionary Book Trap, per usual. Every Sunday, we're out here serving some fire political education, that anti-colonial education, the anti-colonial revolution as the only solution. You know what it is. So make sure we're sharing. You know, we're reading this book on the young lords. The young lords a reader. Okay, we got 13 people up in the room already. Welcome, y'all. Land back, Comrade Solomon.
Yes, land back,
Yes.
Solomon. Land back, I get to see you in there as well. Make sure that you're sharing this with your family members, with your cousins, with your friends, you know, people who just you want to share the word of revolution with. All right. This is our Sunday morning, right?
Man, our Sunday morning sermon.
Yes, our Sunday morning sermon. Some might have services right after this, right? So let's give them the revolutionary sermon before they go off and get that sermon at church. So keep sharing.
I'm gonna share to some groups right now. I hope y'all are doing the same.
Yeah,
hopefully your morning's going all right. We're about to read in chapter 4. Land back, Cheif. So chapter 4 of the Black, or not the Black Jacket. I'm so used to my other book trap. Of the Young Lord's Reader, chapter 4. So hopefully y'all brought some read that backs. We will have a whole portion at the end of the show for y'all to put your read that backs and for us to chop it up. So save them for the end. We will chop it up with y'all.
Yes.
All right, let me write a post real quick. You know what it means.
Yeah. And while Cheif was writing just so people who are watching and are new to us, Black Hammer is an anti-colonial revolutionary mass organization. We are here to smash white power, smash colonialism, and all of its symptomatic offspring, including imperialism, capitalism, and racism, right? And so that's what we're here to do. In order to build that movement, we need the people, we need political education. So this is a part of us making sure our people are politically educated and making sure that we all have the necessary tools to do the work that we're going to do.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Yes, Revolution Sunday School. I like that.
If y'all have not already heard or not already seen in your own hood, you know, our beautiful posters and flyers all over the place, we are building a city, y'all. Okay, we are answering the land question, which is at the center of the colonial question, which is at the center of every single problem that we as colonized people face, right? That's our third principle in unity, which is definitely going to be a theme on this show. This particular episode, we got some recap backs that we connect to that. Yeah, we taking our land back, y'all. We're building a city for Black and brown people. No cops, no rent, no Rona, and no colonizers, period. Black and brown people only. Colonized people, I should say. We ain't crayons, right? Colonized people coming together to really realize our power, realize the effectiveness of organization, right? We are not outnumbered. We are out-organized, period. We are 90% of this world population, y'all. We are the masses. And together we can seriously build a new world and usher in a new era where nobody has to live at the expense of another. Like we said, it's the colonized, poor and working class masses who are the only class who really has a true interest in overturning all forms of oppression, and smashing white power, like Cheif Oji said, colonialism, capitalism, imperialism, and all of its symptomatic offspring, all the cis heteropatriarchy, all the disability bullshit, all of the eugenic intelligence bullshit, all of those things, right? These, things about race and class and gender, they all intersect as symptoms ultimately that have their root in colonialism. And that's what we're here to really grab and tell. And Hammer City is our, material project that's concretely doing that, right? Showing our people a way forward for a future for colonized people wide. So, jeez.
Yes, exactly, right? And we're building Hammer City in Florida, right? We're there where there's a lot of colonized people, right? And we're trying to make sure that this is accessible to all colonized people, right? And once we have Hammer City in Florida, we'll keep moving. We'll have a Hammer City in Nigeria. We'll have a Hammer City in Brazil. We'll keep moving around the world to make sure that colonized people have a place to organize. And so make sure that throughout the book trap today, if you get inspired to help us build this anti-colonial revolution and this new world that we're building together, make sure you donate. It's Cashapp BuildHammerCity. Also, GoFundMe.com/BuildHammerCity. Thank you. Oh, thank you for sharing here, Russell. And welcome. I saw Delisa in there. Welcome, comrades. Great to have you in the book trap. So, yes, shared. Yes, I love it. All right.
Let's see the donation before we even get started. Could we get at least one donation? $5, $1, $10, $50?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's get one before we get started.
Our goal is $100 before we end this morning. Who's finna donate?
Yeah,
I know y'all got the cash.
Support the anti-colonial revolution.
You can always pledge if you're getting paid later. Laying back,
yeah, we colonize. So if you can give something right now, we understand. But if you want to pledge and give us an amount that you are going to give later, you can do that right now too. So let's get one, y'all.
Just one. We waiting.
We waiting because even though the anti-colonial revolution can't wait, we'll wait for you because we want you to be a part of it. Hey, donate 10. Who got match 10? Give 10. Hey,
Cheif. 10. We got 20. What is that? 1/5 of the way there? Is that math? 20? Yep. We're trying to get 100. Okay. We are at 25. 1/4 there, and we're only 10 minutes into the show. I think we can maybe up our goal to 120 at least. That 10 coming in. Beautiful.
Thank you, Neo.
35. 20 from Anye. Excuse me, Lambe. What is it? 20, 35 points. We already at 55.
Great, Pat's halfway there.
Land back.
About our comrades, like our comrades and the people are ready to build. Oh, thank you, man. Okay, y'all showing out this Sunday. Oh,
yeah, 65 already, something like that. I can't do all the
75. Thank you, Lane. 8. Okay, 80. Okay, thank you, Rob.
We got to reach our $100 already. So let's see if we could get 150 today. But anyway, let's dive up into this political education. It's about that time. You want to start us off with a little bit of an overview, Chief Oju, of what this chapter is all about?
Yeah, so we've kind of already covered like the history of the Young Lords Party itself, right? The Young Lords Organization and Young Lords Party. But this chapter 4, we're really getting to the history of the land, right? And that's the important thing as anti-colonial revolutionaries, right? It's all about the land, right? And so we're learning about the history of colonialism on the island of Borinquen, Puerto Rico, and throughout other parts of the Caribbean as well, like Cuba. We're really kind of focusing in this chapter, like what it means for colonialism to like really rear its ugly head over time, no matter really who is the colonizer, right? And we kind of see their tactics over time.
As they evolve,
kind of the result of what it means to really exploit people, right? And we see that from like the moment that, Christopher Columbus landed in 1493 on the island of Borinquen. And then up until the very moment that the Young Lords are doing their work, right? And so, let's get into our first, read that back. I know if you read that chapter with us today, it starts off with this really amazing poem. I bet, y'all, share that poem with people by Pedro Pietri, A Puerto Rican Obituary is the name of the poem. And I want to start with that first, read that back. Pedro Pietri in this poem, he's really talking about these five Borinqueños, right? These 5 Puerto Ricans in New York City, essentially, right? It's Miguel, Milagros, Olga, Manuel, and Juan, right? And in this part, he talks about what they died waiting for, right? And he says, Juan died waiting for his number to hit. Miguel died waiting for the welfare check to come and go and come again. Milagros died waiting for her 10 children to grow up so she could quit working. Olga died waiting for a $5 raise. Manuel died waiting for his supervisor to drop dead so that he could get a promotion, right? And it's like this part stuck out to me a lot, right? Because colonialism makes us wait for it to end, right? It doesn't teach us to end it, right? It just makes us wait to make sure that we're really to continue to be submissive to it, right? But and to never really fight against it and just wait for the crumbs, right? Colonialism is always trying to
right?
Say one more time, Segun.
I was saying I said to believe in its permanence too, right?
Yeah, exactly. To like think that it's this everlasting thing, and that essentially we can die waiting for it to end or for it to change, so that we can live better lives, right? But we don't have to die waiting to live a better life. We can choose to live a better life right now, right? We can choose to fight right now, right? And that's like the other choice we can make. I think that's also what this chapter was teaching. Like the history of Boriken was really teaching me is that we can choose to live the way we want to live. We can choose to have dictatorship over our land, lives, labor, and resources. Like that's a choice, right? And we don't have to wait for these crumbs. Like the waiting for the number. Like I know, like when my mom was growing up in Chicago, as Puerto Rican neighborhood, La Bolita is the lottery thing. That's like waiting for the number, number, they call it la bolita in Spanish. Yeah. And like, this would sustain whole communities. Like talk about in this chapter, sustain whole communities, breaking $20,000, every time they played. And like to the point where like, I know one of my mom's best friends growing up, her family got like raided by the FBI, and like they like strip searched the whole family because they were trying to, essentially stop them from like doing this thing to get money while colonialism was making it hard for them to get money,
Right. And it's the idea too of like a individualistic, type of way of just trying to get some for your own and for your own, get some for yourself and for your own, in this individualist type of way, again, that sees no end to colonialism and says, well, shoot, I'll just try to climb my way in some way to the top, rather than actually seeing, this thing actually, it has its contradictions and it can be overturned, with the power of organization. But again, colonialism wants us to think of its permanence and for us to just, scrap for crumbs. I appreciate what you had said in your summation of it. You were saying, of course, this quote really connects to our third principle of unity. All of the problems that we face as colonized people come from colonialism and from the submissive neo-colonialists, who are within our nations, which we're going to get to later. And what you wrote here, you were talking about, rather than wait to die and wait for the state to give us crumbs, we must organize and band together as Boriqueños, kill the landlords of our cracked skulls, and not accept the death unto which we were born. And there's that part later in the poem that says, or do you want to talk about that piece? They were born dead. And
right. Later in the poem, he says, these, Olga, Juan, Milagros, Manuel, and Juan, they were born dead and they died dead, right? So white power is something that gets us from birth, right? We're born into white power. So we're almost born into death, right? We're born into colonialism. We're born into this violence, into this death. And what we need is to come back to life, right? So revolution will bring us back to life. Revolution is revival in this, right? Revolution will overturn that death and bring life to the land and to the people, right? And so, it's hard for people to say like, hey, like I'm born dead. Like no one wants to say that. Like people want to say I'm alive, I'm here, I'm living. It's like, yes, you are here and you're living, but you're not here and living for yourself. You're not here and living for your own material interest. You're not here and living for your own land. And so revolution will overturn that and make you live for your own interest.
Yeah, I thought it was beautiful. Okay, go ahead.
No, I'm saying this poem really hits. Like this poem, like it's a long poem, but like I would like want to use this as political education wherever I go. It really just hits.
Right, you said something too about revolution is revival, right? It brings us back to life by killing the parasite, right? The white person in our head, telling you just to get, or just to have or telling you just have that we just have to get lucky to live, right? To get that welfare check to live, to create people, have children and them ourselves to navigate white power in order to help us to live, right? Rather than recognizing that we need revolution to live, right? That first step in terms of like, trying to usher in a world of life is exactly that. Like, it's this attack on white power, and it starts with the way that you know, the colonizer has been implanted systematically into our heads. I appreciate too just understanding again that third point of unity about colonialism as the core and colonialism as the key contradiction that leads to all our problems, right? Like people want to just focus on capitalism, you know, and the system of labor and capital that exploits us. And you can imagine, again, these, like, you know, these Ku Klux communists who be trying to usher in some type of socialism, colonialism, where they just spread out the loot, you know, of colonized people in order to, you know, put these social programs or whatever into a state that continues to be in the hands of the white ruling class. You can imagine, you know, that world being ushered in, and there could still be another line on this poem that says, you know, Olga died with her, you know, with her welfare check, and with that maybe with that job, and maybe with that $5 raise, but still waiting for her land to be back in her own dictatorship. You know, so it's colonialism we have to see at the core of it. At the core of it, it's not just capitalism. You know, it's colonialism that sustains that economic system.
Yes, no, for real. I just want to give shout outs to some of the people commenting. You know, land back Helen. I saw Helen came in watching land back. And like, yeah, land back is my, like, yeah, like, and Indu said, like, yeah, like highlighting that revolution is revival, right? And so that we don't die, you know, waiting for our land to come back into our hands, right? And that by getting our land back into our hands, we are finding life. We are seeking life. Yeah, no, I unite with that. And like, that's where I want to be. That's that we always, people, you know, will go back to like the depression and go back to like their sadness, like be finding an answer for it, right? Well, the answer is colonialism is making you sad, right? Colonialism is making you depressed. Colonialism is making you think that your life is not worth something, right? And so in order to fight that, you have to fight colonialism. You have to fight colonialism in order to stop waiting for yourself to be happy, in order for you to stop waiting for yourself to be alive again, right? Revolution will bring you back to life.
Joy.
Yes, and yeah, to bring you back to life and then enjoy your life, like for real. Land back. Yeah, so I think that's one thing that the young lords were realizing, right? The young lords wanted to make sure that their people who were, you know, the poorest people waiting, you know, doing the numbers and like taking the, you know, lowest paying jobs and like being on the street to make sure that, you know, they didn't think that their life started and ended in death or started and ended in this poverty, that it can continue in revolution.
And right, that exactly that continued in revolution, not continued through struggling to reform and get crumbs and maybe try to get more crumbs and get new policies, but to really completely overturn it. You know, they understood that question of revolution. They understood the what's the word? The futility of, like, you know, this electoral, you know, path, electoral systems of voting. And that brings us to our next read that back. There's a great section in this book on page 81/82 called "The Vote or the Gun." That really sums it up. Yes.
Yeah. And keep sharing it, y'all. Keep sharing. We dropping gems. Keep sharing.
We are, you know, yeah. All right, y'all. So this is from the section called "Electoral System." It says, after the revolution, our only political parties all tried to work within the Spanish and then American political structure. The Puerto Rican Republican Party, or Barbosa, the Federal Party of Muñoz Rivera, the Independence Party of Matienzo Cintron, all worked within the party structure to set up for Borinquen by the American occupiers. Some of the parties wanted independence, right? They have this goal of independence, but all of them accepted the American invasion and hoped to convince America to someday free our people. Right? It's all about talk, and promises, like this next line says. While they talked about all of this, right? Talked about independence, talked about convincing this this white power government to give us what it's designed to steal from us, the U.S. destroyed our economy, impoverished our people, right? While they talked, they imposed citizenship. While they talked, they destroyed our farmlands. While they talked, they set up American governors to rule us and put military bases on the island to guard their businesses against all Latinos, right? All indigenous peoples. In 1932, the Nationalist Party, after 10 years of trying to win independence through electoral means, decided that only through war against the U.S. would Borinquen be free. The newspapers, radio, the assembly, the business, latifundas, those are the largest states, haciendas, all were controlled by the US. There could not be free elections. Only armed struggle would free our nation. Pedro Albizu Campos, leader of the party, said, the electoral fight is a regular farce, right? Happens every 4 years here in the United States, to keep the Puerto Rican family divided, right? While these white ruling class sectors decide who's going to have control over this machine that is, a violent, genocidal slaveholding machine that has nothing to do with our freedom. The Nationalist Party, like the secret parties of 1868, said basta ya to the vendepatrias, as traitors of our history. It said there are two alternatives: slavery or freedom, colony or independent nation, oppressed or liberated. Land back, y'all. So I really appreciate this session and this political education, just for laying out again that clear binary. Like, there is no in between, there is no compromise with white power. Any attempt to compromise is literally just a distraction for us to be busy talking about some idealist future that is supposed to be ushered in again by a material machine and system that is designed to dispossess us, like, by any means necessary. And it gets increasingly evolved and increasingly sophisticated in its distraction methods. It's making us feel like we have some sort of hope for getting free within the system, right? That's part of, again, this idea of colonialism being an everlasting and permanent thing, right? But the young lords, like, clearly after, they studied their revolutionary history. They saw that nationalist struggle that clearly came to the conclusion after 10 years of trying to, win independence. Again, the goals of all of these different political parties was independence, right? So there's this kind of latent, obviously, anti-colonial nature to it, but it's not truly anti-colonial until, they really recognize that it's through that armed struggle of the masses to actually overturn, the state apparatus that has dictatorship over their land, lives, and resources, and not until we really have an apparatus to ourselves defend our own dictatorship over the land, over the lives, over the labor, and the resources, will we be able to shift from that slavery to freedom, from let's see, what else did I say? From colony to independent nation, from oppressed to liberated. And again, like, there's no in between there.
Exactly, there's no in between, and like, they keep thinking that they keep trying to convince us there's only a couple choices, right? They say, let's say in the United States, they say Democrat or Republican, right? And there's a third choice, and the third choice is not also on the ballot. The third choice is not also Kanye West. Yeah, the third choice is not also Kanye West. It's not also the Green Party. That's not the third choice. The third choice is to dismantle that machine from the outside, right? And break it down so that because it's an illegitimate machine built on stolen land, right? And just as the Nationalist Party, yes, exactly, right. The Nationalists will never dismantle the masses' house, right? And we have to really think of that materially, right? Like, like that. It's not just like things that they do, right? It's just that they're literally using an apparatus to steal the land and resources, right? So we can't use the apparatus they set up to steal our resources to get our resources back. That makes no sense, right? we have to use our own apparatus. We have to use our own organization to do it. And like, so like, if you're going up to the ballot box, I know some of y'all probably going up to the ballot box, right? If you don't see like the two options are slavery or freedom, then you have to walk right back out of there, right? Like, if you don't be like, okay, like, you look at the ballot and there's just two circles, slavery or freedom. If you don't see that, then walk the hell out of there, because that means that ballot is not in your material interest. Your material interest is to choose between slavery or freedom. Your material interest is to choose between a colony or independent nation, right? And
don't be fooled, period. Don't be fooled by any of this white power, politicking and stuff to try to give, like, when they first imposed citizenship on Puerto Rico in the first place, and then make the situation where, if you're on the island, you can't vote, but if you're part of, if you're here as, on the mainland or whatever, that you have this opportunity to, represent your people and to have your voice. Like, that shit will work. It never has. It never will. And that's not. It's not a viable option for again, the work that we really do, which is connecting with our people, winning us to anti-colonial revolution, winning us to true self-determination, like independence as meaning, again, our own dictatorship. And that means that we have to build, right, We have to build that organization. We have to build those systems and programs, and like feeling too, like within our masses, of our capability to do such, right? To do that in the place. Hey, we got 90.
Ooh, we making that money. And also you can have like a revolutionary, like this is what political education does, right? It makes us understand, yeah, right, David, choice pedal 1 or pedal 2. For real. Political education like pushes us further and further closer to a revolutionary trajectory, right? Like the Nationalist Party we learned here was headed by Don Pedro Albizu Campos, major Puerto Rican revolutionary. But he started trying to do elections, right? He's like, but then they realized because they are looking at history and learning from history and seeing what are they materially gaining once they make the decisions. They weren't materially gaining anything. They're like, after 10 years, they're like, no more elections, right? Now it is the gun. Now it is organized revolutionary action, right? And so that's through political education. And part of political education is literally doing the work, right? They tried doing the work and it didn't do something, so they made a different decision. And that's how we operate at Black Hammer, right? So like if you want to join blackhammer.org/join, if you want to be an organization that looks at history and looks at how things go over time and sees what we get as we do our actions. And if we ain't getting something, we change it up, right? You might be in an organization where you keep doing the same thing and keep getting stuck. We don't do that. We are historical dialectical materialists. That's what that means. We look back, see what we're getting, and if that's not working, we change it up, right?
And we keep our material. Yeah, thank you, Fifina. We keep our material interests of our masses, right? We keep the material interests of the masses at the center of that, like study and of that science of dialectical historical materialism. We're not looking at the material interests of the petty bourgeoisie. We're not looking at the material interests of the few, right? But of the many, the masses of our people. And again, the material interest of the masses of our people is to completely overturn this system, at its root. Time left to playing around like with these half steps and compromises and crumbs. Like, shit is burning, y'all.
Yeah, for real. And like when they made their party, the Young Lords, right? They talk about, like, after they give this history about the Nationalist Party in Puerto Rico in the 30s, they say that we're the Young Lords Party, and our party is a party of the people, right? And our party and our motto is serve and protect, right? So when organizations are forming like Black Hammer, we are of the people, right? We are of the people's interests. We are here to serve and protect our people. I mean, that language is a little like, because, pigs be using it all the time. But, but for us, we are actually serving and protecting our people because we have their actual interest in mind, right?
Right.
Yes.
So join us today if you're interested in doing just that, serving and protecting our people. We're out here on the streets meeting our people, and hammers in your hood. Every weekend you will see hammers across the nation, across this United States, and also across the world in Nigeria. Here meeting our people, providing material, providing for material needs, in the middle of this coronavirus pandemic that is entirely, ravishing our communities, and bringing this Hammer City project to really, again, show our people that with the power of organization, there is a future that is possible. There is a future of political and organizational work outside of the bounds of this, U.S. electoral system.
Yes. And I can't wait till it happens. I can't wait till it happens for our colonized brothers and sisters in Boriken. Can't wait till it happens for Africans, for indigenous people all over Turtle Island. This is a movement of all colonized people. So when you come into Black Hammer, you're not just fighting for the Boricuas, you're not just fighting for the Africans, or you're fighting for all colonized people to get all our land back. All right. So yeah, share the word, and and make sure that we're also building for Hammer City. So so we're still fundraising, right? So because we need these resources to make sure that we can build this city. And so again, Cashapp, BuildHammerCity, GoFundMe.com/BuildHammerCity.
Amen. I'll show you.
Yes. So I think too that one thing we kind of learned that nationalist party in Puerto Rico was doing under Pedro Albizu Campos. They're also learning how to organize, right? Like they had, the young lords had realized that they were maybe a little too trigger happy and kind of did kind of like, you know, a lot of you know, a little bit of disorganized like shootouts, you know, and just kind of like working, like we hear about Lolita Lebron and like Rafael Cantamiranda and the other two comrades, the four comrades who were sitting in the spectators gallery of Congress, watching, you know, Truman give this speech about the land between what's called Mexico and Texas, right? So like here you have like people from Borinquen here like coming up face to face with this conversation about colonized land that's not their own nation, right? And they're still there to like support their people, and what they did is they had, each of them had a gun and emptied their guns into Congress below from the spectators gallery, and they hit a lot of people. They didn't hit Truman. They say here in the reading, they seriously injured like a New York congressperson. You know, and then Lolita Lebron, like she like unfurled the flag. She's like, "Viva Puerto Rico Libre" immediately, right before she got arrested, because they didn't have an exit plan. But I think that's what the young learned. You know, was like, wait, say it again, Segun.
I said that's why we have POAs with exit plans.
So we got POAs and plans of actions to make sure that we know what we're going to do and when we're going to do it. But, you know, I think that's one thing the Young Lords Party learned, right? The Young Lords Party learned that, you know, we have to have organization along with the gun, right? Like we organize around our tactics. We don't just execute tactics, right? We organize around them and plan with them.
And maybe bringing it back to the historical and materialist thing, right? Like we understand that like this system itself knows and kind of almost tries to operate on a dialectic and a historical basis based on our own resistance. So as we resist and as we get more organized, this system itself, you know, reacts to that and shifts and makes its own new evolutions of its own machine of like keeping us down, which gets into this third point of unity again about not just the colonized or not just colonialism being the root cause, but also the neo-colonial submissives, yes, you know, within our own nations. So that gets to our third. Read that back if we could pull that up, yes, on page 88.
So our third, read that back, right? So our third principle of unity, right, says that we believe all the problems the colonized face stem from colonialism and the neo-colonial sellouts of their nations, right? So for, you know, people who might be watching, this might be the first time you're hearing maybe any of these words, right? So what is neo-colonialism, right? So here in this section, they read, the whole continent and the Antilles, which are all the islands in the Caribbean that kind of make a chain, right? The Antilles, the whole continent and the Antilles were a colony under political, military, and economic control. The US was slicker than Spain. McKinley and the other presidents had seen that when you are too openly oppressive, the people rise up. Like Jose Marti, Maximo Gomez, like Betances, like Simon Bolivar, like the American revolutionaries. So the US developed a new form of control, neo-colonialism. Neo-colonialism was a new type of colony, a colony where the government is elected by the people of that country, but where the real power, which is the political power, economic power, and military power, is controlled from the outside. They kept Puerto Rico as an outright, state. Exactly, right? It's just an outside state. So they kept Puerto Rico as an outright old-fashioned colony, but made Cuba and the rest of Latin America neo-colonies, right? So here they're saying, right, that essentially you take a place where the people are, you colonize them, and then when you start to see them rising up too much, you leave, right? And you quote unquote leave, right? Maybe your physical presence in some way, yeah, quote unquote, and give that power to some puppet who will represent the colonizer, but will be elected by the people, right? So it's an illusion, right? It's creating an illusion of freedom or independence, but you're still colonized. And this is an example of it in Cuba, right? When they say they made Cuba a neo colony. So the Platt Amendment to the Cuban Constitution gave the U.S. the right to intervene in Cuban affairs whenever the U.S. felt that the democracy of Cuba or the lives and property of American businessmen in Cuba was threatened. When the people heard that the Platt Amendment would mean U.S. control of Spanish control, they understood that the Revolution of Marti had been sold out, and they reacted. On March 2nd, 1901, the day the Platt Amendment became law, 15,000 Cubans demonstrated against it in Havana, just as Puerto Ricans fought against the imposition of U.S. citizenship 16 years later in 1917. The U.S. took steps to teach the Cuban ruling class how to best keep the people in line. The New York chief of police went to Cuba to train and equip the Havana police. The Guardia Rural Police were trained in the U.S. military forts. This is so familiar. This is just so repetitive throughout colonial history. This happens to this very day, right? We hear about this. Troops or police in other nations being trained by the United Snakes or other white colonial nations.
And their Israeli Defense Force working with United States defense, defense. Again, they're defending their dictatorship over all our shit, right? They have all these techniques that they use, that they reproduce, that they teach each other, that they, try to implant within our own nations, again, to produce these neo-colonial, not just neo-colonial sellouts like individually, but a whole apparatus, a whole system, a whole state that will continue to, operate as it has.
Exactly. And like we don't say like defund the police, right? Because like I'm just saying, it just makes me think of that like in current movements, right? Because when you're saying that, you're not realizing how colonialism repeats and recreates itself in nations without the people, without them being there, right? So it's just it's so much more complicated than like the force itself. Like it's colonialism that really enters and breaks out and kills everything in its path, regardless of who might be living on that land, right? And like the Cuban one's a great example of it. You had Cubans in their mind being led by Cubans, but no, they were being led by the United Snakes, who was training their pigs and putting them into their cities, right? It's just like,
ridiculous. As ridiculous as the whole like defund the police thing is we would think, how ridiculous it would be for, or just how undesirable at the end of the day, trying to have this same colonial state defund its armed forces and put money into programs and education, XYZ, again, still completely out of the dictatorship of our own hands. Like to me, even like that's, even if it was realized, which it never would, like that's not even desirable. But again, just to really drive home how like white power would never, ever defund and take, funds away from the primary, force that it uses to maintain its dictatorship, right? They use the police and they use the military, as well as these like ideological apparatuses of the state, like the school and the media, which are extremely important in, erasing our history and, maintaining people's conscious acceptance of the system. But the police, at the end of the day, and the military are like the hard and fast force that maintains, their dictatorship. So to imagine that they would somehow ever defund the police is just wild to me. And like we see what the way that, even on this whole obviously in the right wing of white power is openly about, like using its police force to, maintain its dominance. Whereas the, the left wing and the little progressive wing wants to, make it nicer and prettier. They will literally fund and do, put even more funds into making the police an even more effective neo-colonial force by, giving them implicit bias trainings. And we're going to hire, indigenous queer police to enforce the murder of masses of indigenous queer people, like across the world. That's the limit of, these police reforms and shit.
Yeah, no, for real, and that's why it has to take a complete overturning of that system. It's not a reform of that system; it's a complete destruction of that previous system, and that's what like the people of Cuba and Puerto Rico were seeing, right? Like when after the Platt Amendment, like from 1902 to like 1953, it was neo-colonial puppet after puppet, puppet after puppet, and every time there's a new puppet, the people rose up a little bit more,
In Cuba, right?
Huh?
In Cuba, you're talking about,
Cuba, Cuba, yeah, the people kept rising up a little bit more in Cuba, right? So then, like, there would be a rebellion and it'd be suppressed, and there'd be a bigger rebellion and then it'd be suppressed, right? Until the rebellion that happened in 1953, led by Fidel Castro, and then from there was the revolution, right? And in Puerto Rico, like this process is really delayed. What we learn here, it's a really delayed process, right? So like 1902 is when Cuba was like starting to realize this, but like it wasn't until 1917 that Puerto Rico was really beginning to get the fruits of this. Like, okay, we're under U.S. colonialism, and they're really trying to trick us into thinking that this is a good relationship, right? And that trick was imposing and forcing U.S. citizenship on Puerto Ricans, right? They forced that, and they even say in this reading how like if you wanted to denounce getting U.S. citizenship, you were put on a list. You were harassed by the pigs. You were denied jobs. Like this was forced citizenship. So this makes even like being like a citizen even more complicated, right? Like being a citizenship is not simple. It's just having papers. It is a full political tactic and tool to maintain colonialism, right? And so they can take it away. They can give it to you. Either way, clearly, it's not in your interest. Right? Like it's not in our interest
to have the power in the first place to either give and take, right? Again, all these forms or these things that are supposed to be, there's a little bit more to trick you into thinking that you're making some type of progress. It's always in the hands of the colonizer. That means you have the opportunity to take it away at any point. So, you know, like even when we seem to get, you know, reforms that are to the people, like I think of like in Bolivia, right, with like Evo Morales, being elected into power and putting in different social programs that did like, you know, materially benefit the people. At the end of the day, if there's no revolution actually seize power over the state, you can't protect those gains, right? If white power continues to have dictators over it, they can swipe that away at any second now. So.
Exactly. No, exactly. Like Kwame Ture was saying, like, the problem is if someone has the power to lynch you, right? Not whether or not they don't like you or not, right? It's the problem is that they have the power to do it. And so if someone has the power to take away your citizenship or give it to you, that means nothing's in your hands. You do not have dictatorship over your land, lives, labor, or resources because someone else does if they're giving that to you. And like. I think that's what Puerto Ricans were beginning to realize into like the 30s, right? Like after the First World War and after getting this forced citizenship, they were starting to realize that, okay, we need to start rising up because U.S. colonialism is beyond not in our interest. And so that's why we start getting the uprisings like in Ponce and the uprisings in Jayuya and those places, right? And I think one thing that the U.S. tried to do was make it a neo-colony now, right? Like, okay, we look too much like an outright colonizer, right? Like they're like, okay, this is not working. They're rising up. We look too much like an outright colonizer. So it was in 1952, and and how they talk about the reading that the Young Lords, how they put it, you get the biggest vende patria in Puerto Rican history, the biggest traitor in Puerto Rican history, Luis Muñoz Marin, who was the first Puerto Rican governor elected on the island in 1952. Before that, there were straight up white colonizer governors running the island, right? 1952, they're like, okay, they're starting to uprise too much like they were doing in Cuba before. Let's put in a Puerto Rican governor, let them elect it. And like this Puerto Rican governor, he tricked them. Like he said, our motto is pan, tierra, y libertad, bread, land, and liberty. Well, yes, bread, land, and liberty. Those three words are in the interest of our people. But he, as a sellout, used those to work for the colonizer instead, and to win to that slogan, to then have them wed still to the colonizer and their interests.
That neo-colonialism, like, sense to, you know, pull out that revolutionary language and slap that revolutionary sticker onto the very same system, right? It's white power and black face, or white power and brown face, revolutionary face.
Yeah, exactly. It's like white power and brown face, and not really, really just tricking our people, right? Like I'm tired of our people being tricked, and so that's what they did, right, in 1952. And I think that brings us to our next read that back, which really shows how the U.S. knew that they were doing this. So the next read that back, it starts off on page right here. It says, this is from the Defense Department Subsecretary's office in Washington, D.C. This is the first, whatever, primary source, whatever the word is. All right. This department, in agreement with the State and Navy Department.
Oh, wait. I thought we were going to go. Whoopsie. I think we skipped to read that back. We had the one about Spain, ride what he can.
Oh, yeah, I skipped one, y'all. Oh, my God. Yeah, let's go back in history, y'all. Yeah, let's go back in history. Right. Because colonialism started way before that. Right. So, basically, this whole thing about trying to, take over and trick the people started from the very first day right? From the very first day that Spain set foot on Boriken. Right. And so I didn't know this. Did y'all know that Christopher Columbus had a son named Diego? I didn't know that until I read this reading. Diego Columbus, who was the first person that they made as the first official governor of the island at that time. Yeah, so F Christopher and F Diego.
And Diego. So we got to read that back on page 101, yeah?
Yeah, it's on 101, and this is when Spain arrived, right? They had this like the young lords describe it here as like that the indigenous people were like seeing the colonizers come, and they're like, who are they? And like the way the young lords describe it is like, they saw them like dressed in like gold and stuff and like shiny metal, and they were white. So like apparently they said that they thought they were gods, right? But here you hear about this cacique. Caciques were the indigenous leaders of the Taino people. And so you had this cacique, Urayoan. So it says Urayoan was an old cacique who had seen many things pass. And as far as he could tell, these Spanish trespassers were not gods. In November 1510, a Spaniard, Diego Salgado, asked Urayoan for some brothers to carry him and his bags across the Guarabo River. Check that out. The Taino brothers, like good boys, carried him, and when they got to midstream, dropped him. They held poor Diego under for several hours, then carried him ashore. Next, they sat and watched. According to the stories the Spaniards had told, their god was dead 3 days and then came back to life. Since they were children of God, made in God's image and likeness, the Spaniards reasoned, they could do it too. So after 3 days, Diego refused to come back to life, and his decaying body was dragged back to Urayoan for inspection. They're like, right? So they're like, oh well, he didn't come back to life. So I guess let's tell our cacique, like, that's like that Biggie song, like niggas be just like us, right? Like it's the same thing. Like, hey, they just like us. Like they ain't nothing special, right? They ain't nothing special, and so. One thing I want to get across though is like we have to make sure that we don't like get into this trap of like of colonial history teaching us that indigenous people were just some like naive people, right? Who just like saw some strangers come on shore and were like, yes, master, right? That's a colonial trick and a colonial history that they try to push on us, right? Which is really clear from the paragraph before when they're talking about how they would force 50 to like 300 Taino people to go under the ownership of a single Spaniard to go work in the mines and to work the land, right? But it's not like the Taino people went to go work in the mines and just did so because they felt like they had to listen to some god, right? No, our indigenous ancestors have always resisted. From that moment that someone came on shore, they didn't say welcome. They didn't just say, oh, you're here? Like, let me listen to you. No, it's always been a history of resistance. So don't let history teach you otherwise. That like somehow people were just naive and just fell into the trap of colonialism. Colonialism wasn't just a trick or just a trap. It was an actual organized action to get the material resources, right? The first place they sent them to work in was mines. That's like that they knew what they were coming for. They left, even if they didn't think they were at the land that they were originally planning to be at. They came with a material interest in mind. They came to take stuff. So and the indigenous people were not slow to that. They were not naive to that. They knew that they were there to take stuff, and so it was the fact that they had to organize against them was the next step. Not that they had to like just figure out if they were gods. That's all they did, right? They were and are intelligent, resisting people, right? The name of the island, Boriken, means land of the noble lord, right? They knew they were a noble people. So don't let colonial history trick you like that, you know?
Right. And how to connect Chief OG to our fourth point of view? You remember you were saying something about that?
Yeah, like, our fourth point of unity is that we are the true proletariat, right? And we are the true leadership, right? And only under our leadership can we smash colonialism, imperialism, capitalism, and all its offspring, right? We are the true leadership. We always know that we're the true leadership. We don't let someone come up on shore and all of a sudden say, you're the leader now, right? What people has ever done that? What people has ever just said, you come up, oh, you person, oh, you don't look like me, you're the leader now. That's never happened. That's never happened. We know we're our own leadership. We know that this is our own land. We know that this is our own soil, our own blood to toil with, right? So, like, there's nothing that should make us believe that other people are our leadership, right? White people are not our leadership, whether they are left or right, wing, whatever. They are not our leadership. They will never be our leadership. We are our true leadership from the beginning of history to this very moment now. We are our true leadership, and we got to act like that.
And know that when we study and we learn our true revolutionary history. Can y'all hear me okay?
Yeah.
Right on. Yeah, I really think about that unity number one, about the fact that we need dictatorship over our land, lives, labor, and resources, right? Part of that is having dictatorship over our institutions, like our schools and like our media, right? It's the fact that we live under this dictatorship of white power that has control over those institutions, that seeks to teach us, this bullshit history, that teaches us about our inferiority, teaches us about subservience, teaches us about again this false history of our just bowing down to colonialism, the colonizer. And so, with our own dictatorship over our land, over our lives, over our resources, at Hammer City, on revolutionary and colonial class at Hammer City, we'll be teaching a revolutionary history that teaches us about these that struggle, about the resistance that's been going on, and that.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like, we have to make sure that we're always teaching our people the history of their resistance, right? And like, I'm seeing people comment like, that's why we have to learn that, right? We have to like learn what our people did and what our people believed in. And like, like exactly, I see like our people did, like our people weren't stupid. Like, we knew what was going on, right? And we fought against it. And so, yeah, like, let's see, people who are out here with us, watching us right now. What are some of the quotes that you all had? What are some of your read that backs? Let's get into it. What were some of the things that you all were reading and like stuck out to you? We'll get those and talk about them. And as those come in, make sure you're still donating. Cash App, BuildHammerCity, GoFundMe.com/BuildHammerCity. And if you're interested in joining, BlackHammer.org/join. But what are some read that back? What's some quotes? Give it to us. What did you see? What stuck out to you?
Yeah, put in the comments, y'all. We'll show up here and chop them up.
Yeah, because this chapter had a lot of stuff in it, and so there's a lot to pull out. Because I'm sure I had about 10 read that backs I had to whittle down from. So, and if you're watching on YouTube, you could comment your read that backs on YouTube. And if you're watching on Facebook, you could comment your read that backs on your Facebook comments. So either way, we'll be able to see it.
Y'all read the book this week? Where it at though? Where it at?
Come on, because we want to know your questions too. And also, like, if you have questions, share that with us as well, so we can, really, lay that down and lay down exactly how, how this chapter lays out the history of boarding Canada on the island, right, and colonialism on the island. So we open up to all of it. Give it to me. I want it. I want it. Just like I want your money. If you would give me a read that back, I want you to at least give me some $5.
You have to read that back. $5 at least.
Give me $5 if I don't get that. Read that back. Either one. But I want to read that back because I want to make sure that I can talk with our people about this reading, right, and about this political education. If not, we got one to bring up, but I want to make sure that we get to the people's questions. And just also remember to the young lords, like this is how they also describe their history, right? So see, Ali says, I like the history of the Bodekin series. Can you talk about how our history is hidden? So beautiful to learn the people's history. I mean, yeah, like, that's what I was actually going to describe. The way that the history series was written out by the young lords in their newspaper, Parlante, right? And they really like traced it over time from beginning to end. And I think that's something that's important to do for our people, right? To lay out, because I thought I knew a good amount of things about the history of Bodekin. I learned about, I think my knowledge has increased like 90%. There's tons of stuff here that I did not know, right? And laying it out for our people like in this like series, I think was really good. So like we have the Black Hammer Times. Black Hammer Times at Black Hammer is like telling our people about what's going on today in this colonial state, what's going on in neo-colonial situations like in Nigeria, right? And like SARS. Like I think it's important to show that, and we can show that through our own literature, our own political education.
Right. I think something is that they laid out not just the history of Bodekin, right, but the whole series on laying out the history of Cuba. And it's extremely important, right, for us to learn not just the revolutionary history of our own particular nations, but of other colonized nations in order to start to see those patterns, right? Those patterns of both resistance of colonized people and those patterns of, white power's crackdown and evolution and co-optation of our resistance movements. Because when we study those patterns, we can start to see, like I think someone commented earlier, right? Like there have been successes, there have been failures, but we can start to see the interconnection between, all colonized people's problems, again, coming from colonialism. And that's one of the things that they want to keep us from, already they want to keep us from knowing our own particular revolutionary history of our own nations, but even more so, they want to keep us from knowing the revolutionary history of other colonized nations, because knowing the revolutionary history of other colonized nations makes us to understand our fundamental unity, right? It makes us to actually see our common enemy and makes us to see, again, the potential of colonized people worldwide coming together to unite and learn and study that history to wage, even sharper and better revolutionary action. Just, again, how important it is for white power to keep us from that consciousness of our interconnectedness, not just of our own interconnectedness with or not just our own connection again with our own peoples, but the interconnectedness with other colonized peoples, because that's where our power lies, is in our unity, and so that's the revolutionary history that we're trying to build here at Black Hammer. We are in the poor and working class colonized people from African nations, indigenous nations, worldwide, Asian nations. We come together and we share our own, knowledge. We learn from one another. We do political education, such as the BookTrap, where we've been, traveling around the world. We went to Korea, we went to Palestine, we went to Nicaragua, we went to Haiti. Now we're in Puerto Rico. Again, we've seen the series of BookTraps, just the same exact pattern. We got our unique histories, but we see the same patterns, and so we got to sum it all up and create our, master POL, uniting and punch my power piece. One for all.
Yes. No. Exactly. Cheif Segun. You laid out like why there's a need for our organization, right, and the need for our people to have an organization like this. And something I wanted to just pull, because there's another question in the comments from Hirasola about like Puerto Rico, and I'll get to Libas read that back for a second, but about like Puerto Rico being viewed as a race within Pedro Prieti's poem, and we have to remember, within a colonized nation, there are colonizers who live there and there are neocolonial sellouts, right? So the people that we have to always focus on, remember, are the poor, working class, colonized people, right? The colonized proletariat. And so, Puerto Rico is not a race, right? Puerto Rico is not a race, just so people know, right? But we ain't playing into the race politics either, right? What we're doing is making sure that we see, are you colonized or are you not colonized? Are you colonized or you're not colonized, right? And essentially, if you are the people who are colonized, then that's who we're fighting for, right? And that's who needs to unite, and that's who needs to unite against colonialism.
Right, and it's, again, like it's the basis of our unity is the fact we share this condition, having our land dispossessed from us, right? Having our land and the resources in it and the labor that we do, our own bodies, ourselves, right? We are the loot to being dispossessed from us, and part of that system of dispossession is this whole ideology of race, right? And these different races competing. And that's not at the core. That's not at the center of where our fight is, right? It's not a fight of one race against another and trying to unite all the different races. Like, it's to unite colonized people against the system of dispossession of our land, right? And that includes the neo-colonial sellouts within our own nations who might be a part of our race, right? But are perpetuating that racist system again. But it's a system, or it's a symptom of a system is based on taking our land, and that means colonialism, that means colonization. So that's why we talk about, colonized people. We don't necessarily people of color or BIPOC or, the crayon box thing of Black and indigenous names, the question, and then people of color. It's all muddled. It doesn't clearly lay it out. Like, colonized people. Yeah, colonized people.
It lays it out simply, beautifully, and materially, like what the situation is, right? It's about having our land dispossessed. Exactly. So let's see. Saliba. Oh yeah, Saliba's react. Toussaint Louverture was born a slave in Haiti. When the wave of uprisings in Haiti hit Haiti in 1791, Toussaint quickly became its leader. In 1793, the National Convention in France outlawed slavery. At 50, Louverture, meaning the opening for his ability to smash through enemy and lines, was no longer a slave. Haiti prospered under Louverture, who put Black people in power. Yeah, I mean, like, especially Cheif, because you had the Black Jacobins for your BookTrap. But like, yeah, I think it's also important to highlight, right? Like, there are all these anti-colonial movements happening all throughout the Caribbean, like at the same time, right? Like in the 1790s, like there are maybe dozens and dozens and dozens of slave rebellions popping up, many of them being suppressed, right? But a lot of them popping up during the same time as Haiti is trying to, and successfully, pulling itself away from the French colonizer nation, right? And so, we have all these movements happening at the same time, and they're learning from each other. Like I had talked about in the first BookTrap, Puerto Rico's flag that eventually that they took on as their national flag is based off the Cuban flag, which was created out of their independence movement, out of their revolutionary movements in the early 1900s, right? And so they're all learning from each other, and Haiti included, Haiti included, which is right next door to Borican.
And back in the poem, Hiraso said, they highlighted speaking Spanish all the time. Even Spanish is a colonial language, right? And they talk about Puerto Ricans are a beautiful race, but there's colonizer Puerto Ricans. Like, they united under their Puerto Rican flag, but did they unite as indigenous people? I guess is my question.
The people themselves, like, political education makes us realize that we have to unite as indigenous people. But the revolutionary movements, especially of the 30s and of the end of the Young Lords Party, they were realizing that, and they talked about this in the reading too. For instance, when I talked about how in the U.S. government they were talking about that, I think it was Comisal was the name of this land between Texas and Mexico, and how Mexico was trying to reclaim this land, right, as part of its nation, and of course the United States was like no, and in this fight, Puerto Rican revolutionaries were saying "Viva la raza" in that fight, right? But they weren't saying "Viva la raza," saying Mexican power and Mexicans. They weren't saying that. They're saying "Viva la raza." La raza was all indigenous people throughout Latin America, and not Latin America, Turtle Island, right? Turtle Island in the southern continent, right? So they were saying La Raza was this. So there were people who are realizing that we do have to unite as all indigenous comrades, as indigenous brothers and sisters, and as indigenous family. They realized that when they made that announcement, right? Like when they said Viva la Raza. So if we use Viva la Raza, I want to hear Viva la Raza in that same way. I want to hear that La Raza is the indigenous people. Of course, it's using a colonial language to describe it, right? And the colonial language that has been put onto our people, essentially, you know, raped by the colonizer, and that's the language you speak, right? Like that's how language really can hurt and break our unity as indigenous people, right? But I think they understood that they were, and I think there's a certain pride that New Yorkers have, right? Like even the Lord said, we're not New Yorkers, we're indigenous people from Boriken. So there's that pride in New York. That pride in New York really runs deep, and we got to like, you know, work against it and make sure that pride gets rooted in indigenous identity and indigenous Boricua life, rather than just the nation of Puerto Rico and we're all just one Puerto Rico, right? No, because Puerto Rico itself is, you know, it's a construct, right? And we will talk about what it means to be from Boriken. And if we're from Boriken, then we can unite with other indigenous people. And then, so Ani was like, I kept wondering why they let certain nations get this false neocolonial freedom, whereas they kept PR an overt colony, right? It's like how the young lords describe it. Like Puerto Rico is like the longest uninterrupted like colony in I think in history at this point. It's essentially it hasn't been in its own hands since 1493 in any way, even in a neo-colonial way, right? As Ani is pointing out, it's not even a neo-colonial situation; it's still an overt colony, and a lot of this has to do with, you know, material interest, right? You essentially, by keeping Puerto Rico an overt colony, you have an endless supply of land and workers. And you can't really have it be unjustified in their sense. The colonizer thinks it can't be unjustified because they're giving it neo-colonial names and statuses. For instance, the name in Spanish of Puerto Rico is the full name of Puerto Rico in Spanish by the U.S. is El Estado Libre Asociado de Puerto Rico, the free associated state of Puerto Rico, right? So they understand that it's a colony, but they are trying to give it some neo-colonial designations because at this point, to look like an over colony would make the people rise up, as history has taught us, as history has taught the United States.
It looks like we got another read that back from Chief Lay.
All right, let's see this. Read that back. Relevant as hell. This cheap labor force would serve American business needs, since unskilled laborers are fighting the Korean War, and the thousands of Puerto Rican poor could be shipped off the island to the U.S. The Marine government propagandized all over the island about the jobs and riches awaiting in America. Between 1950 and 1954, 100,000 Puerto Ricans went to the U.S. By 1955, manufacturing passed agriculture as the major form of production on the island. Right? Exactly. That's why it was still over colony. It's a cheap labor force. There's people and land. And these people, they're bringing in through Operation BookTrap to bring to the mainland, right? To work in the steel mills of Gary, Indiana, to work in the industry of Cleveland, to work in the industry of Chicago. If you see where the biggest Puerto Rican populations in the U.S., they're in factory towns. And for instance, Holyoke, Massachusetts, small ass city in Massachusetts, was the home, I think, of the textile industry, like since the 1700s, has the highest proportion of Puerto Ricans living in one city. Right? Same thing with Allentown, Pennsylvania. Same thing with Springfield, Massachusetts, and then of course like the bigger cities like New York, Chicago, Cleveland, and Philadelphia. But that's why Puerto Ricans are in those places, because they were brought as a cheap labor force, right? And that's what, and the United States knows that, and it continues to use this island as this labor force, and it continues to use the land of Puerto Rico as basically a manufacturing base, right? Exactly. Once they realized that sugar wasn't valuable anymore to come out of Puerto Rico because it was producing so little, they said, okay, let's put the pharmaceutical companies on there, right? There's tons of pharmaceutical companies. Basically, almost all your latex gloves are made in Puerto Rico. Almost all latex gloves that are in the United States come from Puerto Rico. A lot of medical equipment A lot of drugs are made there. They also use the island for NASA, right? They have one of the biggest telescope satellites is in Arecibo. They also use it for a lot of like coal production, and there's lots of coal heaps around the island. Yeah, so it's using the people and using the land, which is what colonialism does. It's all it does.
Always. Right. And that's what Taliba said. She said, I'd seen, Puerto Ricans, begging to be part of this, begging for Puerto Rico to be a part of America. Right. And it's like, we understand that to be a part of America just means to be closer, to the heart of this system that's going to do the same exact thing. Steal your land, steal your labor, steal your resources, have dictatorship over your lives. Right. And they try to make this, they try to like advertise, this American dream of coming here to the mainland and experiencing some type of liberty and freedom. But again, we see it's the same shit, like you just said, with the all these different factory towns where it's just Puerto Rico is just this reserve for cheap labor to come, right? So like being part of America as a colonized person just means being colonized. Like it doesn't ever and will never mean being in control of anything.
Yeah. And the more Puerto Ricans come to the mainland, like Ren said, another wave of Puerto Ricans coming after the hurricane, that won't change the situation. It won't change the situation on the island, nor will it change the situation of Puerto Ricans on this land, right? We just have to make sure that we are working to put the land, lives, labor, and resources of colonized people back into the hands of colonized people. That's the only way. That's the only way we can stop the suffering. That's the only way we can stop being born dead. It's the only way we can live. It's the only way we can be alive. If you want to live, you need to join the revolution. That's the only way to be alive. And for generations to be alive. Like, just real quick, Pedro Pitri, right? He says, like, they were born dead and they died dead. And he says he was talking about Manuel Olga. He said they died today and they're gonna die tomorrow. He said that they're always still dying. We're always still dead until this change happens. Until revolution happens. So yeah.
So join Black today, y'all. If you are interested in being a leader in unity, bringing your people, your own colonized nations that you represent, being a leader, like show our people that we can, solve these problems, can solve all of our problems, because we see the root of all of our problems being colonialism, and that's why a Black organization, we're uniting people of colonizations from all over the world to come together to build organization, to have plans of action, to politically educate our masses, and win us to anti-colonial revolution as the only solution to the plague of white power. That this parasitic system that no matter how much it shifts around and changes its face and throws different crumbs and different distractions, we'll continue to do the same thing. And until we realize, who our common enemy is, until we realize what organization can actually do, we realize that we're not really gonna be making any legitimate progress, towards freedom and towards liberation. Like we said in that one political education, that one, read that back, it's slavery or freedom, right? It's to be colonized or to be independent. And obviously we want to be independent, we want to be free, we want to be liberal. And so, that's what we're doing here at Black Hammer Organization. 4 principles of unity, like you heard us go over today. If you're messing with those, if you feel united to those, you are ready to join. You're ready to become a member today. Go to blackhammer.org/join. You'll get plugged in with your chapter. Come on through to one of our Tuesday rallies that we host. And you can join us too today, this afternoon. If you join right now, we can get you scheduled in here for our Forging the Hammer monthly political study. It's both a political education study and a defense study. We got to sharpen our minds, our bodies, all together to be a force that can actually smash the system. So we're going to be, our theme today is BuildHammerCity, right? Really understanding that, again, revolution is the only solution. None of this electoral nonsense. We're going to be studying some Kwame Ture and a little bit of Huey P. Newton. We got some dope political education to delve into. So that's at 3 p.m. Eastern. Hope to see all you hammers there. It is mandatory political education for all members. It's about to be lit. It's about to be lit.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, so for our members watching right now, we know where we're going to see you at 3 p.m. Eastern. You know you're going to be there because it's our mandatory political education. And we're going to make sure that, exactly, we're sharpening our minds and our bodies, like Chief Segun said. And don't forget, we are still building Hammer City, so please donate. We passed our goal big time, so we increased that goal. So if you're watching right now and are one to the organization, one to the line, and you want to join, also help support Hammer City. Cashapp, Venmo, BuildHammerCity, and also GoFundMe.com/BuildHammerCity.
Today and help, like we be out here in these streets, hammers in your hood, passing out masks to help fight this coronavirus, but also telling our people about the city. It's really amazing. Talking to our people about Hammer City, talking about imagine building a world with building a space with no Rona, no cops, no rent, and no people. Really having that parasitic system off our backs to start to build that embryo of the new, start to smash the old, right, where the hammers, we destroy and we build. Right, we're trying to just wipe our system and we're trying to build something new, and it's all super good just being out here talking to our people, for them to see like, oh wow, like this shit is possible, like they're waiting for us, even they believe in it. So
yes, our people are waiting for us. So join BlackHammer.org/join and be there for your people. Be there to serve your people, just as the young lords did. All right. And if you want to tune in next Sunday for our next book trap session, we'll be still reading the Young Lords Reader. You can
past couple weeks we've just read one chapter because they've been pretty long. This next coming week we're reading chapters 5 and 6. It's like 38 pages.
All right, so we're reading chapters 5 and 6 of the Young Lords Reader. You can find the reading in our library. Just make sure that you check us out there, and also while you're there, learn about our 4 principles. Get them reiterated, get them memorized, and do that and read chapters 5 and 6. And
yes, make sure you read that backs this time now.
Bring back both. Yes, bring back your read that backs, because we need to know what your questions are. We need to know what's sticking out to you, right? This political education is a conversation. It ain't just us, it's all of us learning from each other. It's that collective brilliance. So we want to see what you all got to bring to the table too. All right.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for joining us this week, y'all. We hope to see you next week, and land back.